Why avoidants fear closeness yet crave connection. How many of you have ever pushed someone away just when they were getting close? Be honest. You crave love, connection, and intimacy, but the moment it feels too real, too intense, something inside of you slams on the brakes. You create distance, you say you need space, you convince yourself you're better off alone. But here's the truth. You don't actually want to be alone. You want connection as much as anyone else. But something inside of you says closeness is dangerous. Dependence is weakness. If I let them in, I might lose myself, or worse, I might get hurt. This isn't just a mindset. This is a pattern. And patterns are powerful until you break them. So why does this happen? Somewhere along the line, you learned that relying on others wasn't safe. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional. Maybe the people you trusted weren't there when you needed them most. And so, without even realizing it, you built a wall. But here's the problem. That same wall that keeps you safe is the same wall that keeps you lonely. If you resonate with this, understand one thing. Your fear of closeness is not the real you. It's just a response. And what can be learned can be unlearned. Avoidants experience a deep internal conflict when it comes to relationships. On one hand, they desire connection, love, and companionship just like anyone else. They crave the warmth of intimacy, the safety of a deep bond, and the comfort of knowing someone truly sees them. Yet the moment that closeness begins to feel real, something inside of them reacts with fear, resistance, and sometimes even panic. This isn't because they don't care. It's because their nervous system has been wired to associate intimacy with danger. At some point in life, often in childhood, avoidants learned that getting too close to others came with a cost. Maybe they grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, where the people who were supposed to nurture them were emotionally unavailable, critical, or even dismissive. Maybe they were forced to become independent too early, learning that vulnerability was a liability rather than a source of support. Over time, they adapted. They learned that self-reliance was the safest option and that letting others in was a risk they couldn't afford. This conditioning runs deep, shaping how they approach relationships in adulthood. Despite this protective mechanism, avoidants still have an innate need for connection. It's human nature. No matter how much someone convinces themselves they are better off alone, they cannot escape the biological drive for love and belonging. This creates a painful paradox. They long for deep relationships, but the moment they begin to experience them, they feel suffocated, overwhelmed, or trapped. They may misinterpret closeness as control, equating intimacy with a loss of freedom. Instead of seeing a relationship as a partnership, they view it as something that demands too much of them, something that threatens their independence. This fear of engulfment often manifests in a cycle. At first, the avoidant feels drawn to someone, enjoying the thrill of new connection. They might engage fully, feeling the excitement of being seen and understood. But as the relationship progresses and the emotional stakes rise, their defense mechanisms activate. They might start feeling irritated by small things, picking apart the relationship in their mind, or focusing on flaws in their partner to justify pulling away. They may suddenly feel an intense need for space, convincing themselves that they need to regain their sense of self before they lose themselves in the relationship. What's really happening here isn't about the other person, it's about their internal programming. Their subconscious mind is trying to protect them from past pain by recreating distance. Unfortunately, this pattern keeps them stuck. Every time they push away someone they care about, they experience a temporary sense of relief, but it's always followed by loneliness. The cycle repeats because they have never confronted the root of the problem, the fear that love equals loss, control, or inevitable hurt. Avoidants might believe they don't need anyone, but the truth is, isolation doesn't bring them happiness. Even when they retreat into their solitude, they still feel an emptiness. They might distract themselves with work, hobbies, or superficial interactions, but deep down, they know something is missing. They may even experience moments of intense longing, wishing for deep connection, yet feeling incapable of maintaining it. The key to breaking free from this struggle lies in understanding that their fear of closeness is not a reflection of reality, it's a learned response. Closeness does not have to mean losing oneself. Intimacy does not have to feel like a trap. Love is not inherently painful or suffocating. These are all beliefs formed from past experiences, and the good news is beliefs can be changed. By recognizing that their craving for connection is just as strong as their fear of it, avoidants can start to see that their patterns are not who they truly are. They can begin to challenge the automatic reactions that tell them to run, withdraw, or detach. They can sit with the discomfort instead of reacting to it, rewiring their nervous system to recognize that closeness can be safe. True freedom doesn't come from avoiding intimacy. It comes from learning how to engage in it without fear. Avoidants don't need to reject love to protect themselves. They just need to redefine what love means to them. When they do, they can finally experience the deep, fulfilling connections they've always longed for. The belief that closeness means losing oneself is one of the most deeply ingrained fears for avoidant individuals. It's not that they don't want connection, it's that they associate it with sacrifice, control, or even suffocation. Somewhere along the way, they learned that emotional intimacy came with conditions, that relying on others meant giving up a part of themselves, and that vulnerability could lead to pain, rejection, or even abandonment. This belief is not a conscious choice. It is a learned response reinforced through past experiences and relationships. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotional closeness was either overwhelming or unreliable. Maybe they had parents who were intrusive, constantly invading their space, making them feel as though they had no autonomy. Or perhaps they had caregivers who were emotionally inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes distant, teaching them that intimacy was unpredictable and not to be trusted. In response, they developed a strategy: create emotional distance to maintain control. They built walls, not out of malice, but out of necessity, believing that self-reliance was the only way to stay safe. As they carry this belief into adulthood, relationships become a battlefield between two opposing desires: the desire to connect and the need to protect their independence. When a relationship begins, it feels exciting, safe, and even intoxicating. But as emotional intimacy deepens, they start to feel uneasy. They may begin to fear that their independence is slipping away, that their personal space is being threatened, or that their partner's needs will soon outweigh their own. Their subconscious mind triggers a response: retreat, create distance, regain control. This fear manifests in different ways. Some avoidants withdraw emotionally, becoming less responsive, less engaged, and more distant without even realizing it. Others become hyper-independent, convincing themselves that they don't actually need the relationship, that they're better off alone. Some may sabotage the relationship altogether, finding flaws in their partner or creating conflicts to justify leaving. These behaviors are not about a lack of love or care. They are about survival. Their nervous system has been wired to equate closeness with a loss of self, and so they instinctively push back. Yet despite their fear, avoidants crave love just as much as anyone else. They may not express it in conventional ways, but the longing is there. They may find themselves yearning for a deep connection, reminiscing about past relationships, or even feeling a pang of loneliness when they see others in happy partnerships. This internal conflict, the craving for love and the fear of losing themselves in it, creates frustration and confusion. They might ask themselves, why do I keep repeating the same patterns? Why do I pull away from the very thing I want? The truth is, closeness does not have to mean losing oneself. Love is not about merging into another person to the point of disappearance. It is not about giving up independence or sacrificing personal identity. Healthy relationships are about expansion, not restriction. True intimacy is about two whole individuals coming together to enhance each other's lives, not consume them. The idea that closeness equals control or loss of freedom is a false narrative, a story formed in childhood that no longer serves them. Breaking free from this belief starts with awareness. When avoidants begin to recognize that their fear of losing themselves is not based on reality but on past conditioning, they can start challenging it. They can pause when they feel the urge to withdraw, question their instinct to push people away, and remind themselves that relationships are not meant to trap them, but to enrich them. Instead of viewing closeness as a threat, they can start seeing it as an opportunity for growth, for deeper understanding, for meaningful connection. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to unlearn old patterns and replace them with new, healthier perspectives. But with conscious effort, it is possible to rewire the mind. It is possible to experience intimacy without fear. It is possible to be deeply connected to another person while still maintaining independence, identity, and personal space. Love is not a prison, it is a choice, a journey, a source of strength. And when avoidants begin to understand this, they open themselves up to the very thing they've always wanted but were too afraid to fully embrace. Discomfort is an inevitable part of growth. Yet for avoidants, the discomfort that comes with emotional closeness often feels unbearable. The moment intimacy deepens, their internal alarm system goes off, sending a signal that it's time to retreat. It's not that they don't want love or connection, it's that the experience of closeness triggers old wounds and fears. They may not even realize why they feel the urge to withdraw. It happens automatically. But at its core, the discomfort avoidants feel in relationships isn't a sign that something is wrong, it's a sign that something is unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity can feel threatening, even when it's good for them. For someone who has built their life around self-reliance and emotional distance, allowing another person to get close feels foreign. The nervous system reacts to this unfamiliarity by activating fight or flight mode, making the avoidant feel suffocated, irritated, or overwhelmed. This isn't about their partner doing anything wrong. It's about the avoidant's mind and body struggling to adjust to a level of intimacy they haven't fully learned to tolerate. Instead of recognizing this reaction for what it is, an old protective mechanism, they often interpret it as proof that they need to get away. They may start convincing themselves that they're not ready for a relationship, that their partner is too needy, or that they just aren't feeling it anymore. These justifications serve one purpose: to restore emotional distance and bring them back to their comfort zone. But here's the truth: comfort zones don't lead to growth. And in the case of avoidance, comfort zones often mean isolation, loneliness, and unfulfilled emotional needs. The relationships they pull away from are often the very ones that could bring them joy, fulfillment, and connection if they learn to sit with their discomfort instead of running from it. The key to breaking free from this cycle is recognizing that discomfort in relationships doesn't mean something is wrong, it means something is changing. And change, while uncomfortable, is necessary for growth. When avoidants start to experience closeness, their first instinct might be to create distance. But what if instead of pulling away, they chose to sit with the feeling? What if instead of shutting down, they paused and observed their emotions without acting on them? They might notice that the discomfort isn't actually as unbearable as it seems. They might realize that the feelings of suffocation aren't caused by their partner, but by old wounds resurfacing. And if they can learn to tolerate these moments instead of escaping them, something powerful happens. They start to rewire their relationship with intimacy. This process isn't about forcing themselves to be comfortable with closeness overnight. It's about taking small steps. Maybe it starts with allowing themselves to be vulnerable in small ways, sharing a personal thought, expressing an emotion, or leaning into physical affection without immediately retreating. Over time, they begin to realize that intimacy isn't something to be feared. It's something that can coexist with their independence. They start to understand that their partner isn't trying to control them, suffocate them, or take away their freedom. In fact, the right relationship will allow them to be fully themselves while still experiencing deep connection. Learning to sit with discomfort also means recognizing the difference between genuine personal boundaries and fear-based avoidance. There's a difference between needing space for healthy self-care and pushing someone away out of fear. Avoidants often mistake their fear response for a legitimate need for distance, when in reality, it's their subconscious trying to maintain an old pattern. When they learn to identify the difference, they gain control over their reactions instead of letting their reactions control them. This shift requires patience and self-awareness. The first few times they resist the urge to withdraw will feel uncomfortable, maybe even unbearable. But like anything else in life, discomfort fades with repetition. Just like a muscle that strengthens with use, their ability to tolerate emotional intimacy grows each time they choose to lean in instead of pull away. And with that growth comes a new reality, one where love doesn't feel like a threat, where connection doesn't feel suffocating, and where relationships become a source of joy rather than anxiety. The journey from avoidance to secure connection isn't about eliminating discomfort. It's about learning to navigate it, because on the other side of that discomfort is the life, love, and fulfillment they've always craved. And the only way to get there is to stop running and start allowing themselves to truly experience closeness, even when it feels unfamiliar. For avoidance, communication can feel like a challenge, especially when emotions are involved. When they start to feel overwhelmed in a relationship, their natural instinct is to withdraw, shut down, or create distance. This reaction isn't about a lack of care or love, it's a protective mechanism built over time. Somewhere along the way, they learn that emotional expression could lead to rejection, conflict, or vulnerability that felt unsafe. So instead of expressing their needs, they suppress them. Instead of verbalizing their discomfort, they retreat into silence. And instead of asking for space in a healthy way, they disappear. The problem with this pattern is that it creates confusion, frustration, and emotional pain, not just for their partner, but for themselves. Avoidants often assume that pulling away will bring them relief, but in reality, it often leads to miscommunication, unnecessary breakups, and feelings of regret. They may not intend to hurt the people they care about, but their lack of communication makes it difficult for their partner to understand what's really going on. From the outside, it may look like they don't care, when in reality, they are simply struggling to express themselves. Learning to communicate instead of disappearing is one of the most important steps avoidants can take in breaking free from their patterns. The key is recognizing that communication doesn't have to mean oversharing, losing control, or becoming emotionally dependent. It simply means being honest about what they're feeling in a way that keeps the connection intact. Instead of vanishing when they feel overwhelmed, they can practice saying something as simple as, "I'm feeling a little emotionally overloaded right now, and I just need some time to process. I care about you, and I'll reach out when I feel clearer." This type of statement does two things. First, it gives the avoidant the space they need without creating unnecessary fear or rejection for their partner. Second, it keeps the relationship from falling into the cycle of avoidance and misinterpretation. When a partner understands that the avoidant needs space but is still invested in the relationship, they are far less likely to react with insecurity or panic. This prevents the very thing avoidants fear the most, feeling trapped in an emotional storm they don't know how to navigate. Another important aspect of communication is recognizing the difference between needing space and avoiding intimacy altogether. It's normal and healthy for people to need moments of solitude, time for self-reflection, or breaks to recharge. But there's a fine line between taking space in a way that maintains a connection versus taking space in a way that slowly erodes the relationship. Avoidants must learn to be mindful of whether they are creating distance to regulate their emotions or if they are using space as an escape from vulnerability. One way to differentiate between the two is by checking in with themselves before pulling away. They can ask, am I taking space to come back stronger, or am I taking space to avoid dealing with my emotions? If the answer is the latter, they may need to challenge themselves to communicate rather than disappear. Even something as simple as letting their partner know they're struggling can be a game changer. Saying, I don't really know how to explain what I'm feeling right now, but I just need a little time to figure it out, can create understanding instead of confusion. Many avoidants fear that communicating their emotions will make them look weak or needy, but the reality is the opposite. Healthy communication creates clarity, respect, and trust. The more they practice, the easier it becomes. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, like learning a new language, but over time, it will start to feel natural. Another common misconception among avoidants is that talking about their emotions will lead to conflict or confrontation. They may have grown up in environments where expressing needs led to criticism or rejection, making them hesitant to speak up. But in a healthy relationship, communication strengthens the bond rather than breaking it. Partners who genuinely care will appreciate honesty over silence. The biggest shift happens when avoidants realize that their partner isn't the enemy. Their partner isn't trying to control them, invade their space, or take away their independence. They simply want to understand them. And the best way to foster that understanding is through words, not withdrawal. Breaking the habit of shutting down takes effort, but it's a skill that can be developed. The more avoidants practice open communication, the more they start to see that expressing their needs doesn't lead to loss, it leads to deeper, more secure connections. And in the end, that's what they truly crave. Avoidants often find themselves in a cycle of pushing love away, not because they don't want it, but because they fear what comes with it. Deep down, they long for connection, but when intimacy becomes real, an internal alarm goes off. This fear isn't necessarily about the other person, it's about what love represents to them. Many avoidants have learned through past experiences that love is unpredictable, demanding, or even painful. As a result, they instinctively withdraw, convincing themselves that keeping their distance is the safest choice. But what happens after they create distance? Do they feel relief? Maybe temporarily, but before long, a familiar feeling creeps in: loneliness. Despite their efforts to remain independent, to prove they don't need anyone, a void remains. They may throw themselves into work, hobbies, or distractions, but nothing fully replaces the warmth of human connection. Even when they convince themselves that relationships are too much work, that they prefer solitude, there are moments, maybe late at night, maybe when they see others in loving relationships, when they feel the ache of isolation. This cycle of pushing love away only to crave it later is exhausting. It's a pattern that keeps avoidants stuck, never fully allowing themselves to experience the closeness they secretly desire. The problem isn't that love is suffocating or that relationships are inherently difficult. It's that their nervous system has been conditioned to associate intimacy with risk. The moment someone gets too close, their subconscious mind sends a warning: this is dangerous, you're going to get hurt, you need to leave. And so they create distance, only to find themselves missing what they left behind. One of the most frustrating parts of this pattern is that avoidants often feel misunderstood. From the outside, it may seem like they don't care, like they are cold or emotionally unavailable. But the truth is they feel just as deeply as anyone else. They experience love, longing, and heartache. The difference is that they've learned to suppress these feelings rather than express them. Instead of admitting they are hurt or lonely, they distract themselves. Instead of acknowledging they miss someone, they convince themselves they made the right choice by leaving. What avoidants don't always realize is that their fear of intimacy isn't a permanent condition, it's a learned response, and what is learned can be unlearned. The first step is recognizing the pattern for what it is. Every time they push someone away, they must ask themselves, am I doing this because I truly don't want this relationship, or am I doing this because I'm afraid? More often than not, the answer lies in fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of being disappointed, fear of being trapped. The next step is challenging the belief that love equals loss. Avoidants often associate closeness with giving up their independence, but true love doesn't work that way. Healthy relationships allow both partners to maintain their individuality while still sharing deep connection. Love doesn't have to mean enmeshment, control, or suffocation. It can mean freedom, support, and mutual respect. One way to break the cycle is to practice tolerating emotional closeness, even when it feels uncomfortable. Instead of withdrawing at the first sign of intimacy, avoidants can choose to stay present, to observe their emotions rather than reacting to them. They can remind themselves that discomfort doesn't mean danger, it just means they are stepping into new territory. Over time, as they expose themselves to more intimacy, their nervous system will begin to adjust. What once felt overwhelming will start to feel normal. Another key step is learning to express emotions rather than suppressing them. Avoidants are used to dealing with their feelings alone, but real connection requires vulnerability. It doesn't mean they have to share everything all at once, but small steps, like admitting when they feel scared, expressing when they need reassurance, or simply acknowledging that they miss someone, can make a huge difference. When they allow themselves to be seen, they start to break the belief that vulnerability is weakness. Finally, avoidants must remind themselves of what they truly want. Running from love may feel safe in the moment, but does it lead to happiness? Does it create the life they truly desire? Or does it leave them stuck in the same cycle of loneliness and regret? The more they recognize that their fear is holding them back, the more motivated they become to face it. Love doesn't have to be something they fear, as it doesn't have to be something they push away. It can be something they embrace slowly in their own time and in a way that feels safe. But it starts with one simple decision: to stop running and start allowing themselves to experience the connection they've been craving all along. Avoidants often struggle with emotional dependency, not because they rely too much on others, but because they have spent their lives avoiding the very thing that makes relationships thrive. Interdependent. Deep down, they long for connection, but the idea of needing someone else can feel like a threat to their autonomy. They've built their identity around being self-sufficient, around handling things on their own, and around not depending on anyone for emotional support. The idea of leaning on another person feels risky, even dangerous, because somewhere in their past they learned that relying on others meant losing control. For many avoidants, this belief stems from early experiences where emotional dependency was either discouraged or led to disappointment. Maybe they had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, making them feel like expressing needs was pointless. Or perhaps they grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, only given when they behaved a certain way, performed well, or suppressed their emotions. As a result, they developed the mindset that self-reliance was the safest way to navigate the world. If they didn't need anyone, they couldn't be hurt. If they never got too close, they could never be abandoned. But here's where the struggle begins. No matter how much they try to convince themselves they don't need connection, their biological and emotional wiring tell a different story. Humans are social creatures, built for relationships, built to connect. Even the most independent person still craves emotional closeness, even if they don't always recognize it. Avoidants may tell themselves they are fine on their own, but then why do they feel lonely? Why do they keep coming back to relationships, only to repeat the same cycle? The truth is, their need for love hasn't disappeared. It's just been buried beneath layers of fear and self-protection. One of the biggest misconceptions avoidants have is that needing someone means giving up their freedom. They associate emotional closeness with dependence, imagining that being in a relationship will mean losing themselves. But there's a critical distinction between dependence and interdependence. Dependence means relying entirely on someone else for happiness, security, or validation. Interdependence, on the other hand, is about mutual support, where two individuals maintain their independence while also sharing their lives in a meaningful way. It's about choosing connection not out of necessity, but out of desire. Interdependence doesn't mean giving up personal strength. It doesn't mean losing control or becoming weak. In fact, it requires even greater strength. It means being able to trust another person while still trusting yourself. It means allowing yourself to be supported without feeling like you are losing your autonomy. It means recognizing that asking for help, opening up, and allowing love in isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of emotional maturity. One of the first steps avoidants can take toward interdependence is simply acknowledging when they need connection. Instead of pushing down feelings of loneliness, they can start recognizing them as natural and valid. They can begin to challenge the belief that needing someone is a flaw. When they feel the urge to withdraw, instead of immediately retreating, they can pause and ask themselves, am I pulling away because I truly need space or because I'm afraid of getting too close? This moment of awareness can create a shift, helping them see that their instinct to detach isn't always serving them. Another powerful step is learning to express needs in a way that feels safe. Many avoidants suppress their needs because they fear being seen as too much or too needy. But expressing a need doesn't mean demanding constant attention or reassurance. It can be as simple as saying, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but I want you to know I care about you. Or, I need a little time to process, but I value this relationship. Small, honest expressions of emotion help bridge the gap between avoidance and connection. Avoidants can also begin shifting their perspective on relationships. Instead of seeing love as something that will consume them, they can start to view it as something that enhances their life. A healthy relationship doesn't take away freedom, it adds depth, meaning, and support. When they start seeing relationships as a source of strength rather than a threat, they become more open to the idea of sharing their emotions, trusting others, and allowing themselves to be vulnerable in small, manageable ways. The path to interdependence isn't about suddenly becoming an open book or completely transforming overnight. It's about gradual shifts, choosing connection in small moments, staying present even when intimacy feels uncomfortable, and allowing love to exist alongside independence. With time, they will start to realize that they don't have to push love away to feel free. True freedom comes from knowing they can have both: connection and independence, closeness and autonomy, love and self-reliance. Healing attachment wounds isn't a quick fix, nor is it something that happens overnight. For avoidants, the journey toward deeper connection and security in relationships is often filled with discomfort, resistance, and a deep-rooted fear of vulnerability. They have spent years, sometimes decades, reinforcing the belief that self-sufficiency is the only way to stay safe. They have learned to rely on themselves, to avoid emotional entanglements, and to suppress the need for intimacy. But at some point, this defense mechanism stops working. It starts to feel empty. They begin to realize that no matter how much they convince themselves that they're fine on their own, something is missing. The first step in healing is recognizing that avoidance isn't an unchangeable personality trait. It's a learned response to past experiences, whether it was childhood neglect, inconsistent caregivers, or painful relationships. Something along the way taught them that love was risky. Maybe they were dismissed when they expressed emotions. Maybe they were made to feel like a burden when they needed comfort. Or maybe they experienced relationships that felt suffocating, leading them to equate closeness with a loss of independence. Whatever the root cause, avoidance isn't an innate part of who they are. It's a strategy their nervous system developed to protect them. Once they recognize that avoidance is a defense mechanism rather than a fixed trait, they can start to shift their perspective. They can begin asking themselves important questions. Am I pushing people away because I truly don't want love, or because I'm afraid of it? Am I avoiding intimacy because it's what I need, or because it's what I've always done? These questions create awareness, and awareness is the foundation of change. Another crucial part of healing is learning to tolerate discomfort. For avoidance, emotional closeness often feels like an internal alarm going off. Their nervous system interprets intimacy as a threat, triggering a fight or flight response. This is why they may feel the urge to shut down, withdraw, or find reasons to leave a relationship the moment things get too deep. But just because something feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. The truth is, healing happens through discomfort, not by avoiding it. The more they allow themselves to sit with the discomfort of intimacy, the more their nervous system adapts. Over time, what once felt suffocating starts to feel safe. This process requires patience. Healing attachment wounds isn't about forcing themselves to be different overnight. It's about small, intentional steps. Maybe it starts with allowing themselves to be vulnerable in small ways, sharing a thought they would normally keep to themselves, expressing appreciation for a partner, or resisting the urge to withdraw when things get overwhelming. These small moments of connection create new emotional experiences, teaching their nervous system that closeness doesn't have to mean danger. Another key part of healing is reprogramming the subconscious mind. Avoidants often hold deep-seated beliefs about love and relationships. Beliefs like, I don't need anyone, love will trap me, or depending on someone will only lead to pain. These beliefs feel like absolute truths, but they're just stories the mind has learned to repeat. To heal, avoidants must challenge these narratives. They must start telling themselves a new story, one that says, I can have love and freedom, vulnerability isn't weakness, and I am capable of deep connection. The brain is adaptable, and over time, these new beliefs become the new reality. One of the biggest shifts avoidance can make is realizing that true independence doesn't come from avoiding relationships. It comes from having the emotional security to engage in them fully. The healthiest, most independent people aren't those who push others away. They are those who have the confidence to embrace love without fear. They know they can handle intimacy. They know they can express their needs. They know they can trust, even when trust feels scary. Healing attachment wounds also means allowing themselves to receive love. Many avoidants are great at giving in practical ways, helping, supporting, showing up for others in ways that don't require emotional exposure. But when it comes to receiving love, letting someone care for them, being emotionally vulnerable, allowing themselves to be seen, they struggle. They may reject love, not because they don't want it, but because it feels unfamiliar. But love isn't meant to be earned through perfection or performance. It's meant to be received. The more they allow themselves to be loved as they are, the more they start to believe they are worthy of it. This journey isn't linear. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, when the urge to retreat feels overwhelming. But healing isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Every moment of self-awareness, every small act of vulnerability, every time they choose connection over avoidance is a step forward. At the core of it all, avoidants don't fear love itself. They fear what love represents, the possibility of pain, loss, or losing control. But love isn't the enemy. It's the thing they have been longing for all along. The real transformation happens when they stop running from love and start allowing themselves to experience it fully, freely, and without fear. Here's a powerful conclusion and thank you note to wrap up the speech in a compelling and motivational way. At the heart of it all, avoidants don't fear love. They fear the vulnerability that comes with it. They fear losing themselves, being hurt, or repeating the pain of the past. But the truth is, love is not here to trap or break them. It is here to heal them, to strengthen them, and to remind them that they are not alone. Avoidance may have been a survival mechanism once, but it does not have to be the way forward. The walls they have built to protect themselves have also kept them from experiencing the very thing they crave: deep, meaningful connection. Healing isn't about forcing change overnight. It's about small, conscious choices. It's about noticing the patterns, challenging the old beliefs, and choosing connection even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about recognizing that real strength isn't in shutting people out, but in allowing love in. Every step toward vulnerability is a step toward freedom. Freedom from fear, from loneliness, and from the cycles that have kept them stuck. To those who have struggled with avoidance, know this: you are capable of deep, fulfilling relationships. You don't have to carry the past into your future. You don't have to be defined by old wounds. You have the power to break free, to embrace love on your own terms, and to build the connections you have always desired. Love does not take away your independence, it expands it. It does not make you weak, it makes you whole. Thank you for being here, for showing up for yourself, and for taking the first step toward deeper connection. If there's one thing to take away from this, it's this: love is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. And the moment you stop running from it, you'll realize it was never here to harm you, it was here to set you free. Thank you.